So I built and sold 2 websites in my spare time. When I sold them for around $43,000. And at its peak, one of the websites brought in almost $1,900 in 1 month. So in this video, I'm going to share what I did, how I did it, and would I try again. So hello, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Chaz, and I go by the name of the Risk On Investor. So this channel is documenting my journey to building a £1 million investment portfolio. And on this channel, I'm sharing things that I'm trying to make money, things that work, things that don't work, and I'll also share portfolio updates so that you can see how I'm getting on my £1 million investment journey. If that's content you think you'd enjoy, hit the subscribe button for much more, and you can also join my newsletter, which again is in the description below, where I share thoughts week to week on financial markets and updates on the portfolio that don't get shared on this channel. So I want to take you back in time. Imagine it's late 2019, it's before we've even heard of lockdowns and things like that might be coming up in the near future, and I was out for a walk, and I was just trying to think of things that I could do to build a little business on the side, because at that point my primary focus was just making a little bit of extra money that I could shovel into my ISA, because I was trying to build up a house deposit. I was trying to think up business ideas and things that I could do that had a couple of key attributes. The first was that I wanted it to be quite hands-off, because I was doing this in my spare time. I wanted to be able to just kind of dabble here and there. I didn't want to have to spend time during my day, so that was quite a key concept for me. The second was that I wanted flexibility in time. Again, because I had a day job, that was going to take up most of my time, and I was just going to be doing this in spare evenings and weekends. And I didn't want to spend every evening working on it or every weekend, so I wanted to just be able to dabble here and there. I also wanted it to be location independent, so at this point in time I was doing a couple of days a week away for work, so that meant a lot of travel by train, so I had quite a bit of time on the train and in hotels and things like that, so I didn't want to be tied to a specific location, so I didn't want like a physical shop or anything along those lines. And finally, this wasn't a major consideration, but it was something I'd thought about, was how I might be able to exit at the end. There are a lot of business models where it's quite difficult to exit because you've built something quite illiquid, and so I just wanted something where there was a potential to be able to exit, even if I didn't really know how feasible it might be at this point. Now, as a bit of a spoiler, I did exit 2 websites that I built, and in this video I'm going to share a bit of the story of how I built them up and how I made the exit, and I'll share some of the financials as well behind the scenes. Now, the sale of these websites wasn't actually the reason I was building them up. I was building them up more for cash flow. So I view websites almost in the same way as buying property to rent out. It's quite a similar business model in my opinion. So you're building up an asset, your property or your website in this instance. You put a bit of money in to maybe, make it look good, i.e. put some content on it, give it a lick of paint, that kind of side of things. And then people can find your website. This is the equivalent to people renting your house out. And you can show those people adverts or sell them content, and that's the equivalent of taking the money from the rent. And in much the same way that a house sits there and can just pay you fairly passively, a website can do the same. It will need some updating every now and again in the same way a house might do, but by and large it's not very time intensive, and that was ideal for me. So when you're building websites for cash flow, there's 2 main types of website really. So from this, I'm excluding sort of software businesses and things like that. And the first of the 2 types of website is a buyer intent website, and the second is an informational intent website. So a buyer intent website might be like your Amazon or something like that, where you go to Amazon to buy something, you don't go to read about a specific topic. Whereas an informational type website might be something along the lines of a news website, where you go to read about something that's happening or you want to learn something. And these are 2 very different types of websites. Now, as a general rule of thumb, a buyer intent website is going to be much more valuable per visitor that it gets than an informational website. And that's because a buyer intent website, someone is looking to spend money to buy something, to do a transaction, and so there's room there for you to make money. Whereas an informational type website, it's a little bit more tricky to do that. So just to illustrate that, you could have either someone, for example, looking to buy a trampoline for their garden. That person might be researching trampolines because they're actively thinking about buying or looking to make a transaction where they might purchase that product. That'd be a buyer intent person. On the flip side, you might have someone who already has a trampoline, and they might be looking up how to do a backflip on their trampoline. Now, they're not looking specifically to spend any money, they're looking for information about how to do something. And that's the difference between the 2 website formats. Now, buyer intent websites are much more lucrative because of that, but they're also much harder competition. Can you imagine going toe-to-toe with a website like Amazon as a single person building websites from their bedroom as I was 4 or 5 years ago? So because of that, I decided to go down the information website route. And so the business model for an information type website is you're looking to produce the most helpful content that you can so that people read a lot of a web page, and then in return you might position adverts or affiliate links or try and sell a digital product on that website. Now I built 2 websites. One of them was a lot more successful than the other one. Now to try and help illustrate this video, I reached out to both the website owners that I sold these sites onto to ask if I could use them as case studies in this video. Unfortunately, neither of them got back to me, so the data that I'm sharing, I've blocked out key information, so you can still see the numbers, the traffic, all that kind of stuff behind it, but I've blocked out like the URLs, people's names, all that kind of stuff. So I've shared as much as I can without crossing the line and giving too much away, so I hope you appreciate that. Now I'm going to particularly focus on the more successful of the 2 websites, and I'll talk about why I think the other one wasn't as successful as well later on in the video. And so just to share the headline figures for that website, that one sold for around $35,000, and in its peak month brought in around $1,900 in pretty much passive income in 1 month. Now I'm going to lay out a 5-step process to building a website and cashing out. The final step is the cashing out, so I guess it's only 4 steps to actually building the website. I just want to give some examples and talk you through how you can do it if it's something you'd be interested in having a go at. Now the first step is choosing a niche. Now a niche is just a specific area of interest. So for example, you could say this channel has a niche of personal finance or investing. So you would need to pick a niche for the website that you want to write about. Now there's a lot of conflicting advice online from other people who follow this business model about how you should pick a niche. Some people suggest that you only pick things that you're interested in. Others suggest that you pick wherever the best return on investment is likely to be. Now, I personally went more towards the what I'm interested in, and that's because I was going to be writing some of the content myself, and so it needed to be something that either I knew something about, because then I could write well about it and in detail, or it needed to be something that I was interested in learning about. And it was more towards that second edge where I wasn't actively in these niches, but they were niches that I was very interested in finding out about. Now, if you were going to outsource the entire thing, get other people to write for you, then potentially you wouldn't need to be in a niche where you were that interested in it. You could just follow the money. But it's probably not what I would recommend, especially as I would recommend writing a lot of the content yourself, because that's the main cost really to running one of these websites. Now, of the 2 websites I built, one was in the pet niche, that was the less successful of the 2. The other was in the gardening niche, and that was the more successful of the 2. Now, because it's in the gardening niche doesn't mean that it covered all of gardening, so I actually picked a subtopic within each of those. So in the same way that you might have sports as a niche, and then you could pick a particular type of sport below that, would be just narrowing the focus of a website a little bit. Now you do need to play this a little bit by ear. There's no hard and fast rules here, but you want to be niched enough down that you feel like you can dominate a niche and be an authority figure in that niche, but it needs to be big enough so that enough people would find you. So if we go back to the sports example, you could have sports as your main topic, but you want your website to be just about all types of sport. So you might niche down to a particular type of sport. So for example, it could be football. But now football is still an absolutely huge topic, so you probably wouldn't want your website to just be about football. So it could be about, say, five-a-side football, because that's a specific type of football where you might be able to dominate that particular niche. Likewise, if you pick sport as your main topic, instead of football, you might go for a smaller, less well-known sport, say badminton, for example. Now, I don't know how big badminton is in comparison to football, but I imagine it's much smaller. And so that might be a comparable size niche to, say, five-a-side football. So I started by just kind of brainstorming a bunch of different things that I was either interested in and knew a lot about, or was interested in learning more about. I think I had about 10 or 15 different topics when I first started this. I then went through each of those topics, and I was then thinking about which ones would make the most money. And so the most profitable niches are going to be niches that either have some kind of technology that can be sold in them, or there's particularly high barriers to entry in terms of costs for equipment or things like that. So for example, golf is probably going to be a better niche than football, because golf clubs and all the equipment that goes along with golf, all the shoes, etc., there's a lot more purchasing that needs to happen there than football, where you can literally just buy a football and get going. Now again, there's no real hard and fast rules around that. It doesn't matter a huge amount which one you pick, as long as it's a topic that you think you can write about. So for example, the gardening sub-niche that I picked actually has quite a lot of technology and kind of peripheral equipment and things like that that people could buy, whereas the pet niche that I picked, which wasn't so successful, didn't really have that, and I think that's the main reason why it wasn't as successful. And so once you've picked your niche, it's now time to start planning the content, and this is actually probably the area that you need to spend the most time on, even more so than actually writing and producing the content. If you get this section wrong, it's going to scupper the entire thing. And when you're planning out the content, this is where it's really beneficial to either have some kind of idea about the topic already, or to certainly have an interest in the topic. Because I'm looking to create some overarching broad categories. So for example, if we went back to the five-a-side football example, I could have an equipment category, I could have something about maybe the rules, I could have maybe something about finding a local club, and these are all different kind of subcategories within that website that will be useful for people who are coming to the website. You then think about all those subcategories within your website, and you need to come up with a list of topics about each of them. So once I've planned out a couple of those topics, you now need to find all the different articles you need to write. What are people looking for, and how can you help them? So for me, the best way of doing this that I found was literally to go on Google in an incognito window and just start searching in the search bar. So you're looking at the things that Google auto suggests when you start searching things about your topic. So if Google is auto suggesting it, there's a high likelihood that people are looking for that topic. Now you can do this manually by just starting to type in a keyword and then typing A and then B and then C and just seeing what all the auto-generated results are. Or there's other websites that you can use around. For example, there was one around when I was building the website called Auto Suggest Me, where I could just type in a couple of keywords and it would try those automatically with all the different letters and give you hundreds and hundreds of outputs that Google Auto Suggest would give. You could then dump those into a spreadsheet, which is what I used to do. And then I used to scrape the number of results from Google. So I won't get into the technicals of how I do this, and it's perfectly fine to do this manually. It just takes a long time. And that's to start going on Google, and I would look for the all-in title and then show that keyword. And so that means it's looking for websites that have that phrase that you're searching for in the title of that web page. So it's a very quick and rough and dirty way of getting an idea for how much competition there is for a keyword phrase. And so I would scrape the number of results that Google was suggesting. And so, for example, if there was only 5 websites coming up for a topic which was relevant to that keyword, I know there's not very much competition for it. Whereas if there's thousands coming up, it's going to be really difficult to rank highly in Google when you write content on that topic. I would then filter and sort these by the lowest number, and then I would do an actual manual check. So I'd go onto Google and I would search whatever the phrase is, and then I would just read every single article that was on the front page. It doesn't have to be an in-depth read, it can be a skim through, and you'll soon start to find the same websites are cropping up over and over again. And so what I would be looking for is how I would find those web pages if I was the user searching that phrase. Do those web pages actually answer the response? Do they give me clear, concise information, or do I think I can do a better job? So then I'm looking for phrases with low competition, and where I think the websites that come up for those phrases don't really answer the topic that well. That way I think there's a gap that I can fill. Now I'll be upfront about this. This is a really long slog, but it's really worth doing well and doing it properly. It took me weeks and weeks of working most evenings and most weekends to come up with the list for my websites. Now you don't have to do it as big as I did it. I was collecting information on thousands of terms. You could scale that back, but that's just what I did when I was doing it, and it worked well for me. And so now you're into the nitty-gritty. Now you need to make the content. This is step 3 of the process. Now, if you're really good at writing already and you know a lot about the content, I'd highly recommend writing as much of the content as you can yourself. And that's because I think expert knowledge within the field really rubs off and shows in the writing. But backtracking a bit, if there's a topic that you picked for your niche that you either aren't that involved in, you may need to hire some outside help to help you write about it if it's a topic that's not easy to learn about theoretically. Now I actually did a mixture on both the websites. The more successful website, I actually wrote more of the content myself, and that's because I was first starting out and I wanted to keep all my costs as low as possible. So by writing the content yourself, at this point you've spent basically no money. You've spent maybe £100 on some hosting and a domain, whereas if you're outsourcing all the content, you'll have to stump up even more money before you start seeing some results. Now the content I was putting out was typically maybe 1,000 words to 3,000 words in length per article, and you're really trying to be the most helpful piece of content on the web for that topic. So that might mean looking at maybe some relevant YouTube videos you can embed in your article, maybe some diagrams. If it's a topic that you're interested in or take part in yourself, I'd highly recommend you get out and you take photos of you doing that, or show your equipment and really show off interesting things about it, so it's not just stock photos and things like that on your content. Because that's really where you add the value to the reader, and it's all about making the best content possible and adding the most value. Now, if you're outsourcing your content, a few sort of benchmarks that you can use. When I was doing this 4 or 5 years back, I would typically look to pay around 3 US cents per word written. So a 1,000 word article would cost you about $30 to outsource. Then there'd be buying stock photos on top of that, any other content that you might need to produce along with that article. So you're looking really at probably anywhere between 50 and 100 US dollars per piece of content that you're putting on the website. Now, since I built these websites, there's been a bit of an AI revolution. I think a lot more AI writing tools have come out. Now, I'm still split about whether I think using AI for writing is a particularly beneficial thing. So, for example, if we take ChatGPT, which is OpenAI's publicly available large language model, when you ask it to write some content, it has what I call GPT-isms, where there's something not quite human about the way it writes. There's something that sounds a bit too formal, even if you ask it to write informally. Now, there are ways to change this if you know about that, especially if you hook up your own interface via a website called OpenRouter. You can change a lot of the tokens behind the scenes, so you can change the penalization for repeating of words and things like that in ChatGPT, which can make much more human-sounding language. So I think there are ways that you could write with AI if you wanted to, but I would probably want to stray away from it, or certainly you need enough human input into it to firstly make sure that the AI is actually writing factually correct things, and secondly so that it flows well and reads nicely. And so if you're out taking photos with your own equipment and things like that, then you're probably going to have to do a lot of the writing about that, because the AI won't necessarily know what's in the photo or how best to explain what's going on in the photo. So I think if you wanted to use AI for this topic, you could, but it would be more to expand on your writing rather than writing the whole article. So for example, you could bullet point out all the key concepts and ask an AI to expand on each concept and then go back and edit it yourself if you're not particularly happy doing large chunks of writing. But another reason I'd probably stray away from using AI is because we don't know how it's going to be dealt with by Google in the future. So I don't know whether Google will ever go down this road, but I do wonder whether Google might penalise AI-generated content in the future, especially if we get a lot of it just flooding the internet. So just do be very careful if you go down that route. And it's not the route that I followed, and it may work and it may not. I can't really recommend either way. So now we've got a niche for our website, we've got a bunch of topics we've decided we're going to write about, and you've started pumping out content. Now this is basically where you get your head down and you just focus on writing. Now my benchmark was ideally to get to 100 articles on a website. And so by that point you might have written 250,000 words maybe. And once we're into that level of content, we can start looking at step 4, which is monetization. Now, before we start talking about monetization, I just want to talk about the growth trajectories of websites. Now, websites grow in quite an interesting way. I just wanted to explain it so that you don't get too downhearted if you start building websites and find that no one's visiting the website. What I was finding is that when the website was new, it might take 6 months before Google really started sending any traffic to the website. Now, I assume this is because Google is trying out your content for lots of different results to see what it gives the best results for. And that's a slow process. And so once Google finds out what your website is about, it will start ranking topics quicker, but that just all takes time. So you need to be pumping out content, maybe a couple of articles a week, and 6 months down the line when you're at, say, 50 articles or something like that, you might just start to see the first shoots of your growth starting to happen. So it's perfectly normal for it to take a long while for that to happen, but just be ready for that. Now, there's 3 main ways to monetize an informational site. The first and probably your most consistent method is through ads. So ads will typically pay anywhere from say $5 to $50 per 1,000 views on a website. Now there are some key things that change that ratio that you get paid. So the first is where the traffic comes from. So if the visitors for your website are from higher income countries, so especially the US, but say Canada, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, they're sort of the big 5 English speaking countries that I was always trying to target. People from those countries have higher purchasing power, so it's generally better for advertisers to advertise to those people. And the second thing that impacts how much you'll get paid is the topic of your website. So if the topic is, say, more finance related, or as I was saying earlier, something where there's technology or peripheral items that someone needs to buy, then you're going to have more advertisers bidding to be shown on that website. And so that makes your website a much more desirable place for advertisers to be, and therefore you get a larger share of that advertising revenue. Advertising is also cyclical, so as we reach Q4 of the year and head towards Christmas, that's when you'll see the highest ad rates, so October, November, early December, and then they'll massively drop off again in sort of January time. So again, if once you implement ads on your website, say it's Q1, January, February, March time of the year, you're going to see much lower ad rates than you're going to see at later points in the year. So again, don't worry too much about that. And so the second way to monetize a website is through affiliate partnerships. Now, for those of you who don't know how affiliates work, is that there'll be a company with a product, and instead of spending their own money to advertise a product, they will pay people a commission for sending purchasers to that product. So probably the most popular website for this is Amazon. So if you're an affiliate for Amazon, you can put a tracking link into a URL. And that means that if someone clicks your link and purchases that product, you get a small slice of the commission that Amazon would have received. Now, the websites that I built typically were focused more on ads than they were on affiliate products, but because of the quantity of traffic that you're trying to get through informational products, you'll just naturally get sales if you have affiliate links on your website anyway. So you can see here, I didn't make a huge amount through affiliate marketing, but typically it might bring in sort of $10 or $20 a month. And the final way of monetizing is information products. So this could be ebooks, it could be video courses, it could be checklists or challenges, something like that, but something where the user can get value and that you can charge some money for. So my gardening website, which is the most successful of the two, I actually had an ebook written for that website. So I had about a 200-page ebook written, and I sold that for just shy of $20 a pop. And on a typical month, I'd get 20 to 30 sales in that. So I was averaging, say, $400 to $600 per month selling that ebook. So it very quickly paid for itself. I think it cost me around $1,000 to get produced. Now, I didn't have a digital product on the website that didn't work out as well. And that's because I didn't build the digital product until I saw that the website was gaining traction, because the digital product was a higher cost outlay than just producing new articles and new content for a website. And so by this stage, you'll have a website in a niche that you either have learnt a lot about or that you know a lot about already. You'll have loads of content on it, maybe 250,000 words or so, and you'll keep building that into the future, just posting the odd article here and there. You'll have loads of traffic coming in, maybe 30, 40, 50,000 page views. You'll have ads, affiliate links, maybe a digital product at this stage. And so at this point, your website should be earning you some decent money. So now it's, what do you want to do with it? Now, there's a couple of different things you can do with it. The first is just to sit on it and earn the recurring passive income from it. Now, in hindsight, I look at especially my more successful website and wonder if that's what I should have done, but it's not what I decided to do in the end. I did decide to exit and sell those websites. So at the time I was selling websites, I don't know what the going rate now is, but you could sell for around 30 to 40 times the monthly profit. So if a website was making around $1,000, you could sell for 30 to 40,000 $. And there are different places you can sell websites. Some of the common ones are Empire Flippers, for example. So that's generally for bigger websites. There's Flipper, which is generally for smaller websites. And then you could do it privately through Facebook groups or through private brokerages. And I actually did both of these website sales through private means. So one through a private small brokerage and one just through a person on a Facebook group. Now that all sounds really rosy and really dandy. I've shown you high level how the business model works and how I built 2 websites that I sold for over $40,000. But what are the downsides of this business model, and why am I not trying it at the moment? Well, for me, the biggest downside is the time sink for the return. So there's a lot of effort that you need to put in up front. I was telling you about the weeks of research for all the different search phrases you're going to go for, and that's before you even start writing the content. Once you start writing the content, there's weeks, months, even years worth of content that you need to produce. And you don't necessarily know if that content is actually going to get traction. You're obviously trying to write the best content for the topic, but Google might not agree that you're providing the best content and might not rank you as highly. So there's quite a lot of unknown in this business model. But of the 2 websites that I produced, I made a profit on both and made good money on both. So I actually think from that point of view, it's quite a high percentage chance of success compared to many other business models. Now there's 2 main reasons that I'm not trying it now. The first is time. As I said, it can take 6 months to even see any traction once you start posting your content. That means realistically, it's probably 9 months after you started the journey before you even start seeing any visitors to your site. And it's probably a year to 18 months before you start seeing real solid traction. So you have to have a long time horizon for this business model. And the second, and I briefly touched on it, and that's the impact of AI on written content. Now, I do think human content at the moment is still better than AI content, but I don't know for how much longer that will be the case. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's people out there pumping out websites with just hundreds and hundreds of AI articles on them. And to be honest, they're probably making a lot of money from it, but I certainly wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. I don't think it's a particularly honest form of business, and it's certainly not something that I would encourage or want to do myself. If I was going to use an AI tool, it would be more of an assistant to improve my writing rather than to generate the content itself. Now, if you want to see more content about this business model, I could go into a lot more detail, and I'd be more than happy to if that's something you guys are interested in. Leave comments down in the description if that is the case, and I can show you more practical step by step. I can dig into each step and show you how I did certain things. But because I'm not going to be actively using this business model going forwards, I'm probably not going to talk about it a huge amount unless it starts to crop up and gain a lot of popularity on the internet again. But I hope it's given you some food for thought. It's given you some ideas about what you could potentially do if you're looking to build a small business or earn some extra income on the side. Hopefully it's shown you what's possible as well. It took me about 1.5 to 2 years to build those 2 websites up, and I was just doing it in my spare time. If I had a lot more time to put into it, or maybe if I'd seen some more results from people who had done it, it would have given me a lot more energy to hit it a lot harder than I probably did. And maybe I could have seen some even better results after that. But if you'd like to see the different things that I am trying out, you can subscribe to the channel down below, or you can view this playlist, which is my side hustle playlist, and you can see what I've tried so far, what's worked and what hasn't worked. So thanks very much for watching. Bye.